Hello, everyone. This is Pat Lynch, and you are listening and watching As the World Turns or Burns, our political show brought to you from the KILT studio deep in the heart of the Mabee Simpson Library at Lyon College. Joining me, as always, are
Kieran O'Keefe,
Brendan Connell,
and behind the board, making a return appearance. It's been a while, and who's behind the board making the magic happen today?
Producer Cheyenne.
You bet. Yeah, we had a whole season last semester, it was last. Oh, I'm old.
Last spring, I
last
think.
spring, yeah. So it was a good run, and she is back. All right, what are we going to talk about?
Iran.
Really? That's easy. All right. Well, you mentioned it. Okay, Brendan, you go first.
I mean, we've invaded Iran. We're starting a war. The war has started. This is going to go on for at least a few months, I imagine. And we've obviously killed the supreme leader.
Yep.
So that creates the whole question of what comes next in Iran, and if it even is going to be regime change, or if you simply have perhaps his son seems to be the favorite now to take over. Technically, the way things work in Iran on paper is there's something called an Assembly of Experts. This is like an 86-member body, I believe, that is supposed to hold the Ayatollah accountable as well as selecting a new leader. But since the Republic of Iran has come into existence, there's only been 2 Ayatollahs.
Yeah.
So this assembly hasn't really done much, and it's questionable if they really have true power at all, like most authoritarian regimes. I think there's a lot of informal networks that kind of determine power and who, obtains leadership. So I guess we'll see what happens, though, in the upcoming weeks and months with that. But we are at war with Iran. It's official, and Israel's involved as well, and Spain's angry with us now, and
they won't let us use their bases for. I don't know if it's for planes flying out or missiles.
Yeah.
Yeah. Never saw that coming.
Well, I'll say I did get it wrong. I think we did have this conversation of like, is there going to be actual military intervention in Iran? And, my guess was no, because again, I don't think it's a wise political move in the long run. And we could talk about what the public opinion backlash will be. But I was wrong. I mean, Trump is clearly willing to use force. And I think this is way more of an extreme use of force compared to Venezuela, which was more of like a surgical strike, if we want to call it that. This is like a full-blown war, and Israel's involved too, and I think that's a part of the story here. So that's what we're dealing with.
Yeah. What's the objective? It's not regime change, because they're Venezuela, they just put in second in command. That didn't really change anything. This doesn't appear that it's going to be like that the Bush doctrine of promoting democracy, or just trying to let the opposition come into power. So why was this done?
So I think it is about regime change and trying to create some sort of government there that's going to be more friendly to both the United States and Israel. So more of like a reformist government, maybe.
Yeah.
Notice that's different than saying to create democracy there.
Right.
I think those are not necessarily the same thing as regime change and, instigating some massive revolution that creates democracy. But I mean, it's always tough to kind of, I guess, answer these questions of like what the motive is in real time, because obviously I'm not privy to the meetings and what's going on in the war room and what the logic is here. But I will say it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense with the narrative that's being put out there. Because what did Rubio say? Rubio said that he was kind of giving like the preemptive logic.
Right.
So it's like, we were going to have to fight them anyway because Israel was going to go in.
They were going to launch.
And then Iran predictably would have not only retaliated against Israel, but they would have retaliated against U.S. assets. So this is like, I guess, kind of your standard preemptive logic of, use the element of surprise. There are offensive advantages to attacking first rather than waiting to waiting to retaliate. So if a war is going to happen, you might as well strike first. That doesn't make sense though, because if it's almost like Iran's attacking because of Israel, and then we have to preempt what Iran's doing in response to Israel. So wouldn't the easier thing just be to use our leverage against Israel to say, don't do that? It'd be very easy to do. We fund this regime. We've given them, I don't know how many billions of dollars in military aid over the years. So that makes me think that, one, I think there's interest within the United States that this is not just the Trump presidency, but we've always been close to Israel. Right. So part of it is just we're on Israel's side. But the other part of it maybe it's just, I think there are at least parts of the Trump administration that do want regime change in some way. So they're using this as an opportunity. That's my read on it. But,
I think it has to be regime change. You don't assassinate the entire leadership of the Iranian government if it isn't regime change. Take out the Ayatollah, took out however many other leaders of the government. My question is whether or not it's possible to effect real regime change without boots on the ground. If that is the objective, I don't know you can just do that from airstrikes. I'm a little bit skeptical of that. At the same time, I think Trump probably knows that the political reaction in the U.S. to airstrikes is already going to be a bit mixed, and the reaction to boots on the ground is going to be much more negative. I don't think there's going to be much at all of an appetite in the U.S. for boots on the ground. But he hasn't quite sworn that off yet. He's kind of run around circles in that question. He's been a little bit indirect in responding to it, saying he's not afraid to do anything, but he's not committing to it yet either. I think putting boots on the ground would be pretty crazy. I don't know how that would even work. We're just going to go and occupy Iran for 20 years and try to put in some sort of new friendly government. How does it even work? I just don't think any kind of boots on the ground is going to work. But at the same time, if you're trying to get regime change, I don't know that airstrikes are going to be all that effective in affecting that either, because you can decapitate the leadership, but it might just be people down from lower on in leadership who take that spot rather than, when I was in the who's going to be the successor to the Ayatollah? Is it his son or something? So, that is a son going to be that different than the father? I don't know. I don't know much about Iranian politics really, but it doesn't seem like there's going to be, it seems unlikely there'd be complete regime change unless you had more force than just some missiles that you're firing from U.S. bases in the area.
And Ayatollah Jr., I got a feeling that, he probably had, was his bedtime story was something about death to America. So,
he's coming.
It doesn't sound like it's going to be real pleasant.
He's coming from the hardliner camp.
Yeah.
I don't think he's been in the public eye all that much, but apparently there's reports he's been behind sort of the crackdown against the protests that have been happening in the lead up to this. So
we could get just meet the new boss, same as the old boss. It's but the thing with boots on the ground, I don't think Trump really cares. It's like he so much went his way. And and when that happens, there's that hubris that sets in, and I just think that he just, in his own mind, just sees this as working out, and that it's going to be unpopular, but he's going to just do it. I see your wince, as far as my logic here. You disagree?
I don't know what he's going to do, but my guess is if there was a ground operation, it wouldn't be a long-term one.
Yeah.
It would have to be brief. He's not a political idiot as much as we like to make fun of Trump for being a buffoon. He does have some good political instincts, and unless you're completely oblivious, you'd have to realize the American public does not want another Iraq or Afghanistan. Yeah. And also, you think back to the invasion of Iraq, the Bush administration put on a propaganda campaign for months, if not over a year prior to that, trying to convince the American public we have to do it for this reason, that reason, this reason, mostly around WMDs, but there are other related reasons as well. The Trump administration hasn't done any of that. There's been no effort to try to win over the public. And true, Trump is not going to be up for re-election, so his own political fate will not be that tied up in what happens in Iran, but there's going to be a lot of pressure on him from, I think, Republicans, probably not overtly, but more covertly behind the scenes, who are up for re-election and know that a war is going to be really unpopular if it involves boots on the ground. I could be wrong, but I think it's unlikely we're going to have a full-blown ground war in Iran. It just doesn't seem like it's likely to me.
Now, Congress has a vote tomorrow.
I think it's in the Senate, right? The Senate's trying to pass something.
The War Powers Act or whatever. So just to approve, which I'm guessing that it'll. What do they need? A simple majority. So you have the Republicans plus Fetterman, and I don't know. Maybe there might be a couple others that approve it. So that won't be a problem at all.
Yeah, it'll be an important vote, I guess, for that goes on the record, obviously, so people will signal what their position is and lock that in.
Right.
But it's it's going to be a partisan vote, like most things nowadays in the Senate. So,
to go back to regime change for a second, just related to what we were talking about a few minutes ago, if the goal of Trump is to force out the current government, the Iranian people do not like the United States. If Trump is calling for them to do that, is that going to make them more or less likely to rebel against the current government? My guess would be less likely, not more likely, just given the perspective Iranians are going to have on the U.S.
But he just wants probably something similar to what is happening in Venezuela, where you have a compliant leadership that just doesn't cause problems and lets he's got that what he's getting oil, and then just being able to get oil for a discount, and and he's always has that mercantilistic approach to things. And what's Iran the second biggest source of oil
and they control the Strait of Hormuz, which is I think a fifth of trade. Yeah,
so he's just if he can get some, I guess. Fine, you're still a religious cleric-led government, so be it. But as long as if we can do business together, everything's cool.
I don't know enough about the similarities and differences between the governments of Venezuela and Iran.
Yeah,
but it just seems that an anti-American strand is so baked into Iranian political and social culture. Are you really going to get a compliant government? Maybe you could get one that's a little bit less anti-American. That's sort of what's happened. Iran has had governments that are more open to working with the United States and much more militant and working against the United States in the past few decades. So I don't know. The whole thing just seems not terribly well thought out from my perspective looking in.
I will say they do have. I think the general public, there's probably a healthy amount of people that actually don't see the U.S. as an enemy, and there's definitely been a reformist element, even sometimes within Iran's government, that is not as it's not as hardliner by definition. But to Kieran's point, I think if you are going to have some revolution that creates true democracy, and democracy that can be consolidated and sustained, that's not going to happen with the U.S. pushing for it, because that will backfire, because this is how we got the Islamic Republic to begin with. To Trump's credit, he at least kind of put down I don't know if it was a rumor or what it was, but the son of the Shah to come back. And I was like, oh man, is this going to be, we're just going to replay this part of history. But who was the prime minister before the Shah? I think it was Mossadegh. Mohammed Mossadegh is his first name, maybe. But he was... he wasn't a communist or anything like that, but he had ties, or I guess he had some supporters from, I believe it was the Tudeh Party, it's called, Tudeh. Don't fact check me on this, some people, but
fact check.
But we, and we viewed that as threatening because this was the Cold War time, and so there was Operation Ajax, I think it was called, to overthrow that, install the Shah, and then we had a pro-Western leader, but one that ended up creating this anti-American, anti-colonial sentiment that leads to the Ayatollah. So we have to make sure we don't do that again.
Right.
And the best way to do that is, again, to become super involved and try to put in these puppets and try to, basically run Iran for itself. You know, you have to kind of let them choose their own future.
That's Venezuela, right? That's, you know, where Delcy Rodriguez, you know, it's like that she has to get clearance on things from from the U.S. and get a compliant leadership in Iran. I mean, think about it. If they could get the sanctions lifted, you know, and all, you know, what that alone would do for, you know, all their economy and the people. Plus, Iran, it's really weird that when they were attacked, you realize how isolated they are. You know, this axis of evil, you know, China, Russia, you know, they're not coming to their aid at all. They don't really have any friends, you know, at all. You know?
Yeah, the other Arab countries don't like them, and part of that is religious differences between the Shias and the Sunnis going back.
But
I think wasn't Mossadegh trying to nationalize the oil? I feel like that
plays a part too. Yes,
for the takeover and the expansion of the Shah's powers. But yeah, they're very isolated, and that goes back a long time. They've been in this Cold War of sorts with Saudi Arabia for quite some time now, so they don't have very many friends at all.
Yeah, and so, you know, there's actually, you know, there's upside. You know, like you know, if they we'll agree to this, and who knows? Just to kind of related to this, where is Israel going to land? Like with this, because, you know, I just sense that this whole aggression by Israel and we're dragged into it one way or another, and is that going to change the opinion of Israel in this country? I mean, their ruthless counter attack, you know, after October 7th, their ruthless counterattack started changing things, and now it's kind of like they're the aggressor in the region, and, you know, now we're getting pulled in, and it's not, you know, you always have to be careful, because then the minute you talk about that, it's anti-Semitism, this and that. But I just sense that there's going to be a continuing people that will rethink our relationship with Israel. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I saw a poll the other day. I don't remember who it was by, but it was tracing who Americans had more sympathy for, Israelis or Palestinians, over the last few decades. And it's within the last year or two that's finally flipped, where more Americans say they're sympathetic to the Palestinians than Israelis. And this goes back decades. And usually it was like an 80-20 breakdown, 80% more sympathetic to Israel, 20% more sympathetic to the Palestinians. But Israel and the American public has definitely fallen in terms of how Americans view Israel. And Israel across the world has become almost a pariah state in certain areas. I think that would change if Netanyahu was not there and you had somebody more moderate, maybe a centrist or center left or somebody that was in power. But as long as Netanyahu is there and he's pursuing these policies, I can't see Israel's image getting a whole lot better unless he were to make some dramatic changes.
Any thoughts, Brendan?
Yeah, I mean, Israel's reputation will maybe take a hit somewhat, but I do just think that things are so polarized nowadays where the public opinion just kind of maps on to public opinion toward Trump.
Yeah.
Even in looking at just like the numbers of people that support the strikes in Iran right now or support intervention, however the question was worded, it like almost exactly mirrors just support for Trump, right? So like Democrats are against it. Independents are mostly against it, but not as much. And then Republicans as a majority are in favor of it.
Yeah.
So I think that's just the state of politics right now is, I don't know, if you haven't like found out by now that Israel is not simply just someone that's protecting itself in self-defense.
Yeah.
I didn't need to see this in Iran for me to come to that conclusion.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Who knows? Maybe more voters will sort of start to realize this.
Yeah, but then it comes to voting aid packages, and there's things that that different administration may be rethinking the relationship. who knows?
This really wasn't a partisan issue a few years ago. That's a really development of a pretty recent time period. You can go back 15, 20 years ago. Israel was primarily a bipartisan issue.
Right.
Democrats a little more critical of Israel than Republicans, but it was mostly a bipartisan issue, and that has flipped in the last. I mean, it goes back more than just the current war, the recent war, but it's become much more divisive in recent years for sure.
Prediction: we'll do a short term. 3 months from now, where will the whole Iran situation be?
We're still involved, and we're still bombing them. And I don't know. I think now that we're kind of a little bit into it, I could actually see some sort of boots on the ground, maybe just covertly.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows what the CIA is cooking up, but I think this is going to take a while to die down. I don't think this is going to be as flash in the pan as Venezuela was.
No.
It's really hard to predict, and someday somebody could go back through all of our podcast episodes here and just make fun of all our bad predictions because there's so many of them have just been wrong. But it's very hard to predict the future, so I'll probably be wrong. So 3 months from now, one of the contingent factors on this is our missile defenses. It sounds like we're running pretty low on some of those missile interceptors, and if we run out of those, and Iran's using these really cheap drones to just like fly bombs into our bases, maybe they'll put pressure on Trump to find a deal and find a way to just kind of declare victory and get out. My guess is that if it's not over 3 months from now, it'll have died down quite a bit. Trump is very sensitive to certain things politically. One is gas prices. He's already driving up gas prices. He cares a lot about gas prices. Even in Arkansas, it's up like 20 cents or something in the last few days, and that's only going to go up further. So if it hits that, and especially if it ends up rocking the stock market in some form, I think Trump will find a reason to try to declare a fake victory and get out. But I could be wrong. We could get more involved. I think the idea of a full-scale invasion is really unlikely, but some sort of limited boots on the ground, I could see that. Maybe we'll bomb them to the rest of Trump's administration. I don't know. I think the whole range of possibilities is on the table, but I think there will be some political pressure on Trump to make this faster rather than longer.
All right. Since we're doing predictions, will this impact the November elections?
Marginally, maybe. If it impacts the elections, it could be from something like gas prices going up. The average American does not really care about foreign policy that much, and so I don't think the average American is going to go, I don't think it was internationally judicious to assassinate the Ayatollah, so now I'm going to vote for the Democrat. I don't think they're going to do that, but I do think there are some voters who, this is like one of my pet peeves of voters. I always roll my eyes when somebody tries to blame the gas prices on the president. But in this case, it's a little bit on Trump's fault because he did launch this war, which is going to drive gas prices. I could see something like that if more Americans end up getting killed. Right now, it was like 6 Americans dead. Yeah. But if it ends up where we're talking about several hundred Americans killed, that can make a difference. So if it's really drawn out, I could see it making a difference. If he declares victory in a month and says, we won, I'm out, probably not. But, it is interesting. My guess would be that in the short term, support for the war might go up a little bit because a lot of Republicans, their gut instinct is going to be no war. But when Trump's like propaganda machine goes into effect and says, oh, this is great, we need to do this reason, that reason, they're going to kind of back it. But then as it goes on longer, I think then after maybe a little brief sort of support, it'll die off a little bit because independents, Democrats, some Republicans will oppose the war. So that would be my prediction, maybe a little effect, but it depends on how long it is. The longer it goes on, the more of a consequence could have effect on the elections.
Yeah, it's way too far out right now, so it just depends on if it does become something long term. I remember like the Charlie Kirk thing happened, and it seemed like that was going to be like some sort of seismic change, and I mean that died down in 2 weeks or so. And it's just such a quick news cycle. I mean, especially for voters. So we'll have to see. But I think that support for the war will be as high now as it ever will be. It just goes down from here. I mean, that's like saying the sun will go down and the sun will set. Like voter support will always start maybe somewhat high, particularly in the incumbent's party, but Give it usually about 6 months or so, and then things start to kind of come down, especially as the casualties go up.
Yeah.
So again, we'll see if this lasts that long, right? Who knows how involved we'll be, but the longer this does last, the more that it will damage the Republicans, not just in 2026, but then maybe 2028 as well.
Yeah, I think it's going to have more of an impact than it appears right now, and the reason is that this is just one more thing that takes the current administration away from the whole affordability message. That, if you look at the time and attention, it's all been empire building, Venezuela, Iran, by all appearances, it looks like now their sights are set on Cuba, as far as doing something there. And it's going to be, you're doing everything, outside of the U.S., but, I still have $6 boxes of cereal, gas over $3, it's going, they'll never be able to get on the affordability message, which for an election issue, it just seems like it's just something that the Democrat Party can really zero in on.
Yeah, I think foreign policy rarely helps you in an election, but it can hurt you, is what I would say. And if it does, it does lead to domestic downsides, whether that be from higher prices or whatever else, and it distracts from any attempts to deal with the economy. It could, in that case, it could hurt them in the elections, but we'll see. I don't know. Trump is very good at branding everything as a success, so I think there's a good chance at some point he's going to say we're out and do the victory signal and say we won. Yeah, mission accomplished.
Yeah, immigration too will be important. Just because of the whole ICE stuff I looked at the numbers for like independents, and they don't really approve for the most part of Trump's the way he's handled immigration, which is kind of a debacle because I think he ran on the message of getting tough on the border, which he did, and that was, I think, popular amongst voters, not just Republicans but independents and maybe even some Democrats. But I think the whole ICE stuff has just that whole news cycle has, I think, damaged the image of his immigration policy as well. So, we'll see what happens in 2026. I do think that the Republican Party has a uphill battle, though.
Yeah. I mean, the way things are trending, it looks to me that there's a decent chance Democrats will have a very nice year.
Yeah.
We're ways out still, but it's trending that direction.
Which is not abnormal. I mean, it's midterm elections, so.
But speaking of that, as far as the elections that just happened, on Tuesday, so you had the Senate primary in the great state of Texas, and Kieran, you and I were talking, and it just never ceases to amaze me, the moral emptiness that is in politics today when someone like Ken Paxton can actually be a viable candidate. The same guy that his own Republicans wanted to impeach him for corrupt practices. The thing with where what I forget the attack dog that the Trump administration has in the that goes after the people that take out two mortgages. Like they were going after the Lisa Cook, the Fed chair.
I remember that.
It's Bill Pulte. Ken Paxton, I think, has 3+ homes that he always claiming as his primary residence. He's had multiple affairs. There's all this money that's been missing out of his budget. Hey, but he's still electable. It's like how did we really get? And I'm not trying to get all more moralistic, but it really it's just become just completely morally empty, that there's literally no disqualifier anymore for somebody to run for office.
That's part of the problem with really polarized politics. You rationalize people on quote unquote your side who
Yeah.
you otherwise wouldn't in a more, less polarized environment. But yeah, he should not be a viable candidate. Was he impeached for bribery among a whole host of
Yeah.
other issues and right all the affairs? And he's impeached by a Republican
His own
assembly
people.
in Texas and was acquitted by the Senate, which included his wife in the
Yeah.
Senate. his now ex-wife, but current
Right.
then his wife. So yeah, it's very disappointing. On the Democratic side, there was also an important election in Texas between James Tallarico and
Yeah.
Jasmine Crockett, which honestly, that's when I was following a little bit more closely because I think I'm not predicting the Democrats will win the Texas Senate seat, but I looked at Kalshi earlier, and so the prediction market
Yeah.
has it at a 34% that Tallarico wins, which to me sounds about right. I wouldn't say that he's the favorite, but just based on the results of these past elections I've seen recently, the special elections, the off-year elections last year, even some of the Arkansas elections yesterday were a lot more competitive than you would expect between Democrats and Republicans. All that sort of building up to the Texas election later this year, I think there's a chance you could win Texas. You could win that seat, especially if it's Ken Paxton. That's where Democrats maybe want to be Ken Paxton, not John Cornyn, because Cornyn will placate some moderates in a way that Paxton will not. And so I could see, you had mentioned the example Alabama earlier with Alabama and Roy Moore, where in 2017, Doug Jones comes in and wins a Democratic Senate seat in Alabama, which is crazy in today's environment. And Texas is not as red as Alabama was or is. So I think there's a chance. I wouldn't bet on it, but it could happen. And I would not. The last time the Texas Senate seat was open in 2024, there was no real chance of the Democrats picking that up. But it's a midterm election. It's off year. Democrats are the ones who are more likely to vote in these elections than Republicans are. There were way more Democratic ballots cast yesterday in Texas than Republican ballots, which, make of that what you will. But I think there is a decent chance they can pick up Texas, and they can pick up Texas, they can pick up the Senate.
Yeah. Well, that in North Carolina, too. It seems that's another one that could be picked up.
I think they're favored to win North Carolina at this point because they've got a popular former governor. They got him. Governor. So if they're going to win the Senate, they have to win. Maine's a must. They have to win Maine.
Right.
Which we'll see. I'll get back to Maine in a minute. I think there's a lot to talk about with Maine. But they have to win Maine. They have to win North Carolina. They have to win probably Ohio. And then they have to pick up another one beyond that. Texas could be one.
Right.
Iowa could be one because Joni Ernst is retiring.
Right.
Florida is tough, but maybe Florida. I think of those, Texas might actually be the best chance. But Ohio is possible because was it Sherrod Brown is running? Brown is running, and
popular.
He's kind of huge name recognition. I think you just have to nominate him because the name recognition component to that is so important. He was in the Senate for such a long time in Ohio. Everybody will know him. And he didn't lose by much when he outperformed Biden last election. Yeah. So there's a chance he could take a seat there. And then Maine is interesting. Susan Collins has survived a long time, even in presidential election years. In 2008, Obama won Maine by 20 points or something. And Susan Collins won her seat by 25 points. Yeah. So there's a lot of ticket splitting. And ticket splitting is it's dying off. It's not really a thing anymore.
But for the Democrats, my goodness, you got Graham Plattner. Okay, so that's kind of dicey at best. And then is it Janet Mills?
The governor, yeah.
That's what's she, about 104 years old? I mean
77. She'll be the oldest first-time senator. So the polling, the main primary is not until June, but it looks like Plattner's going to win. He's way ahead in all the polls coming out right now. And he's more like a Bernie Sanders kind of candidate, populist, unconventional. And he has, some controversies in his past, but that's also when we get to the point where people are running for office and they grew up in the age of the internet, it's just going to happen. It's just going to happen. People who are born in the 60s or something, their experiences, their youthful mistakes were not on the internet because the internet didn't exist yet. The youthful mistakes of somebody who's currently 35, 40 years old, it's going to be on the internet in many cases.
Yeah.
So,
speaking of the internet, I'll speak direct to the camera that no matter what you say, all three of us, we really do like you, Patrick the plumber. Okay, you have, you know, you got a point of view. We respect that, but you know, just keep watching, keep recommending our show to others, and I don't know, you guys have any other?
I just read.
Kind words?
Does anyone remember Joe the plumber from McCain and
No,
Obama?
I brought him up. So he,
Famous.
well, he actually died a couple years ago of pancreatic cancer. That's what I was talking about Pat
Yeah.
before. I remember reading about
R.I.P.
that.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to bring up quick, and it's just be a couple minutes,
Yes.
but the Dan Crenshaw primary,
Yeah.
where he lost yesterday in Texas. And this is so much of what's wrong with politics in the U.S. That you get so many people who on the internet, or people I just know in my life, especially those who aren't as politically engaged, will say things, who don't like Trump, will say things like, oh, why don't these Republicans stand up for their beliefs? Why don't they stand up to him? Why aren't they doing anything? Why are they letting Trump do all this stuff? And what happened to Dan Crenshaw is exactly why they let him do all this stuff, because he was definitely more of a MAGA person, but he didn't go along with the 2020 election being stolen.
Yeah.
He was like a little critical of the Freedom Caucus. He didn't vote to ever impeach Trump. He was a strong conservative veteran. And what happens, he loses a primary to a more MAGA candidate. And this primary system is just, it's kind of killing democracy in some ways, because you're getting these completely insane candidates who are winning. And it makes the people in office who aren't insane have to act like they're insane because they have to win the primary. And Trump, it happens on the left too, but Trump has such a stranglehold on the Republican Party that, you know, the reason they don't stand up to Trump is that you're going to be out if you do. Think of the Republicans who stood up to Trump. Jeff Flake, he's gone. Liz Cheney, she's gone.
Yep.
Adam Kinzinger, he's gone from a gerrymander, but he would have been gone from a primary if he wasn't. So there are so many, you can't do it and get away with it. You will be destroyed in a primary. And I don't know, it wouldn't be popular, but this is where, like, you know, maybe you get rid of primaries. It's not going to happen. That will never happen. But if you have to take the power out of the hands of the most extreme people. So you can't get rid of primaries, but I'll go back to gerrymandering. If you get rid of gerrymandering, then you would force voters to be smarter about who they're nominating, because they know that an extreme candidate's more likely to lose a general election.
All right. Anything, Brendan?
Nah, Kieran cooked on that. That was good.
You know, that's a very, since Kieran cooked, that's a fitting way to end it, Bob. So thank
Kieran the cook.
Kieran
and
the
that
cook.
could be the
I'm not actually a good cook.
What was the rock? They can smell what the Kieran is cooking.
There you go. Yeah.
All right, but thank you everyone, especially you, Patrick the plumber, for listening and watching as the world turns and burns. Also, just want to thank producer Cheyenne, for stepping in and coming back and recording the show, and then I'll just have to say goodbye.
Yep, see you next time.
Later.
All right. Take care.
This podcast is sponsored in part by Lyon College and KILT Studios. Thank you to Jonah Winter for the intro and outro music.